Welcome to Oak City Church, a family of learners, lovers, and givers sent. For more information, visit us online at oakcitychurch.com. Let us know if we can help you in any way. Thank you for listening.
I'll be reading from Mark 6, 1 through 6. He went away from there and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. And on the Sabbath he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? What is the wisdom given to him? How are such mighty works done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And where are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense to him. And Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor, except in his hometown and among his relatives and in his own household." And he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. And he went about among the villages teaching. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks, Aaron. Good morning, and happy Father's Day. We're going through the Gospel of Mark, and as I get into the passage and kind of where it sits with us today, I want to point out what's happened the last few passages, because Jesus has been on a really good run. He's on a hot streak. He a couple weeks ago, he calms the storm, so the disciples are in the boat and they think it's going to capsize and they're going to drown, and Jesus is asleep in the stern. They wake him up. He's like, "Guys, I got this." And the storm goes from like crazy to everything's calm. And it says they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" So they're like, what is this? And then the week after that, they go to the land of the Gerasenes, and there's a guy that's oppressed or possessed by demons, and it's been getting worse and worse. Nobody's been able to control him. They can't even chain him, and he just seems content living among the tombs in his torment. And Jesus comes and casts out the demons, and the pigs go off the cliff, and the townspeople come to Jesus, and they saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, and he's sitting there clothed and in his right mind. He's at peace, and the townspeople were afraid, and they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. So they're like, "Who is this guy?" And then last week, John talked about how he raises this little girl from the dead. And so Jairus' daughter has died, and Jesus comes to his house and raises her. It says immediately the girl got up and began walking, and they were immediately overcome with amazement. And so this is a good run. And Jairus is the ruler of the synagogue, and so if you're the disciples, you think this could be really good for the movement, because maybe he's got an in with the Pharisees and the scribes, and now maybe they'll come over to Jesus' side, and so it looks like things are going really positive. And then Jesus decides to go home to Nazareth. So for how many of you does home have a little bit of an aura to it in a positive way? It definitely does for me, in a way that sometimes doesn't make sense. Sometimes does, but sometimes doesn't. I get a little nostalgic for home. Lots of bad things happened, at home growing up, but it still is something that I look upon fondly. Nostalgia is like this. We talk about the good old days sometimes, whatever those may be, and like bad things happened in the good old days, but the good old days tend to distill down to the good. And I think that's the case because we survived those days, and so they were good enough for us to make it through it. And we're just not so sure that's true of right now, And the news the last week or so, it's up in the air. We're not quite sure. And so it makes sense that we could look back at a time like the 80s and think, man, those were the good old days. And objectively, they were the good old days because we had great hair in the 80s, and we had the good Michael Jackson in the 80s, and we beat the Russians. And so what more do you want out of a decade than that, But bad things happen. In the 50s, people think those were the good old days. And in some ways, I mean, we just won a world war against two fascist dictators, and saved the world, and nobody else could make anything because their industrial base had all been bombed out. So we were making bank, like we were raking in money in the 50s. And so it seems like those were the good old days. But if you were an African-American person, it wasn't the good old days for you, So we just tend to nostalgia can do that, and time can give something kind of an aura for us. And I recognize that about home for me. So when the kids were younger, we would go to Wisconsin. That's where I'm from. Every year, usually twice a year, holidays, and then in the summer we'd go for a week. And we'd load the kids up in the car at 5 o'clock in the afternoon because there's 4 of them. And it's a lot to have 4 kids in the car for 15 hours. And it's a lot better if they're asleep. And so they would go to sleep, and the car would just drone them to sleep. And that became nostalgic for my kids to the point where even a couple years ago, they're like, hey, can we drive through the night someplace? And I'm like, well, what if we just went to Walmart and slept in the parking lot in the car? Would that do it for you? Or, but there was a nostalgia to it. And that trip was great. And when my mom moved down here years ago, I realized I'm really going to miss that week as my favorite week of the year. And I just examined that to figure out why. And so some of it was just the family, and we went, and it wasn't Christmas, so we didn't have to deal with presents and schedules and the weather, which is fun, but all that, it was just we went to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin in July is better than North Carolina in July, or we'll tell you that much. And we had routines of going to there's a park we would go to that my kids will all remember. You remember the park? And we would go to the ice cream place, same ice cream place, and I was asking them about this the other day, and Abigail's like, we'd stop at Skyline Chili all the time, and we would be driving through Chicago at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and the L, we would drive through the city, and so the trains would be running alongside us, and it's just kind of spooky, and it was great, And then we'd get there, and we'd take some day trips. We went to Lambeau Field once, and that was awesome, and then we took the train to Chicago, and another year, and so it was just a refuge of a week. And I realized after a while, there was something more to it. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional. And so years ago, I have been telling any premarital counseling group this for years, that every family is dysfunctional, and your family doesn't seem, it's possible it doesn't seem super dysfunctional to you for the same reason the good old days are good, because you survived your family. So they functioned well enough not to kill you. And so they were functional enough, but they're not. But every family is dysfunctional because we're all dysfunctional. And so with some distance and experience, you think, oh, that wasn't as normal as I thought it was, especially if you get married and after a few months, your spouse is like, your family's crazy. And you're like, well, your family's crazier. And you're both probably right, and it's okay. When we got married, I realized my folks had split up, so we didn't take family vacations really, and past an age. But when we got married, Bobby Joe was the oldest, and she still had two younger brothers, and so we were expected to go on family vacation. Like, okay. And I just realized spending time around them that I felt like kind of a square peg in a round hole, and I couldn't figure out why, And it's not, I didn't know what to do about it. It's not that I'm not dysfunctional. It's just that my dysfunctions didn't match their dysfunctions. And so as everyone got older and her brothers got older and got some time and distance, and then they got married and brought other people into the family, then it just became apparent the ways that the family was dysfunctional. And it's fine, because we're all sinners, so we're all creating dysfunctional families right now, and you have to accept that with humility. I've said that you should be saving for college for your kids, but you should also be saving for counseling. So when they come back to you in their 20s and are like, why did you do that to me? You're like, I don't even know why, but you're right, I did. So here's some money, and here's the name of my therapist, so you can have a head start on all the stuff. They'll already know what's going on, So, summers in Wisconsin. What I realized is when I went back home, I was at rest emotionally because my dysfunctions fit perfectly. And I think part of that is because your family warps to your own dysfunctions, and everybody is that. And part of it is because they know that they're responsible, and so they have a lot more tolerance for your dysfunctions, and they accept them. So I went down this rabbit hole for a reason, because Jesus is going home, And I just want to put you in a place where home can be comforting, but it can be complicated at the same time. Because you're not the same person now as you were then. And so most of us, like, you go away from home for a while and you change, and then you come back home, and that change happens at a distance, and so people don't see that change happen. And so there's a real adjustment to be made to it, right? Yeah. So Jesus goes home. And Jesus is a different guy. I don't think he's a different guy than he was, but he's a different guy than they thought that he was. And they're having a hard time adjusting to this. So he goes home to Nazareth. Nazareth is a little town in the north of Israel. It's not even like, there's not much written about Nazareth in history until a couple hundred years after Jesus outside of the Bible. It doesn't mean it wasn't there. It just means it was tiny. Like, they think it was about 500 people when Jesus was there. And so if you got a tiny town of 500 people, you've got his family, but you probably got some cousins in there, right? Aunts and uncles. You probably got extended family. And at 500 people, everyone is everybody's family. And not like blood necessarily, but everybody feels like family. And so I would expect that he goes back to Nazareth and it's a refuge for him, but it's not. Honestly, I would expect he goes back there and they build a statue for him, like Rocky. Like, there should be a Jesus statue in Nazareth because this is the hometown boy done good. You know, he could put Nazareth on the map. I thought that, and I went to the Wikipedia page for Nazareth because you know how in cities they'll have notable people? You know what I'm talking about? I was like, I wonder if they have notable people, and I wonder if Jesus made the list for Nazareth. But they didn't even have a notable person section. So there you go. But this is what I would expect when they go back there. So he went away from there, and he came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. And on the Sabbath, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? And what is this wisdom given to him? And how are such mighty works done by his hands?" So this could be positive, or it could be negative. Like, where did he get these things? He's got things. And where did he get them? Because I don't remember him having these things. And what is this wisdom that's been given to him? Because, you know, it's like they hadn't heard this wisdom before. But then they say, how are such mighty works done by his hands? Which that seems kind of skeptical. And if you remember a few passages back, the religious leaders accused Jesus of casting out demons by the devil, by the same spirit of the demons. And Jesus is like, come on, guys. Think about it. That doesn't make any sense, does it? You know? And it's like these guys are leaning in the same direction of he's doing these mighty works, but like, how is he doing these mighty works? You know, is it a good power or is it a bad power? And then they say, isn't this the carpenter? And that word can mean like handyman, could mean like stonemason. So isn't this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon, and are not his sisters here with us? So now it seems like they're taking shots at him. So is this not the carpenter? I think this could definitely be a slight. Like, he's the handyman that's now a rock star in Israel. It made me think of, this is for old people, this picture. Do we have this picture? Anybody remember this guy? How many people remember this guy? Yes, you've called yourself out as old. Who is it? Yeah, Schneider. His name is Schneider. And the longer you go, the creepier it gets, because One Day at a Time was about this single mom and her two teenage daughters, and Schneider was a handyman. And it's really creepy in hindsight, you know. But at the time, it made perfect sense, because it was the 80s, and that's what we did. But Schneider was just this quirky handyman. And it's like, you know who Jordan Peterson is? Like, regardless of what you think of him, he goes around and just talks to, he was at in Durham at whatever the performing arts thing is in the spring. Yeah, and it's like 15, 20,000 people come see this guy everywhere he goes. It's like if Schneider went from being Schneider to having like a tour where 20,000 people come see him every night. Like, that's kind of how they're looking at Jesus. It said, isn't this the son of Mary? And that is, there's a debate about to the extent to which that's a slight. So Jewish people, when they do a genealogy, it's always through the father. Like, this you know, son of a guy who's the son of a guy who's the son of a guy. And so it would be more natural for them to say, isn't this the son of Joseph? And Joseph has passed away at some point. We're not sure when. So some people are like, well, maybe Joseph has been off the scene for long enough that it's Mary. Or maybe Mary is just a more prominent figure in the Bible, so that's why they use Mary. But a number of people are like, they're taking a shot. Isn't this Jesus, the son of Mary? And like they're alluding to the suspicious circumstances surrounding his birth. The son of Mary, whose father we were never quite clear on. So they read that as a slight. And don't we know his family? Like, who is this guy? And then it says, they clarify that they're taking shots at him. It says, and they took offense at Jesus. They took offense at him. And the word is scandalizo, so it's used in a bunch of different ways in the New Testament, but they're all bad, and they're scandalized by Jesus and his presence. And this is, how could you be offended? How